All right, so welcome to the School Psychology Review special Zoom webinar on COVID-19 and school psychology, featuring the guest editors that are joining me here today. We'll introduce each of us in a moment, but to begin with, just wanted to encourage each of you that are active on social media to follow us on the Twitter at School Psych Rev and on Facebook at School Psych Review there. And if any of you are active on social media and want to share information during the webinar, you're more than welcome to blast out screenshots or encourage information or share information about the content that we are covering today. So want to make sure everybody's welcome there. Hopefully the sound and audio works throughout. And there is a brief poll that's been posted. And on that poll, you can see that we're just trying to get a sense of who's participating today. And today, based on the results that I can see here, we have 90% faculty. So faculty are well represented today, perhaps at the end of the quarter, not so many students with some of our other webinars, lots of students, but mostly faculty here today and researchers. And then in terms of the experience of colleagues, in terms of the number of papers they've submitted, there's a couple that haven't submitted any papers yet. So hopefully this will be a good overview of information for each of you. A few that have submitted 1 or 2 papers, a few that have submitted 3 to 5. And then we have about half of us who have submitted 11 papers or more, so quite experienced authors as well. And then in terms of the topics related to COVID-19 and school psych that you are personally interested in, it looks like about, about 20% are interested in the special education related topics. About 25% are interested in supporting academic progress. About 67% supporting social emotional learning progress, about a third interested in remote and distance learning, and then also about 25% interested in communicating and engaging parents. And then about more than half are interested in unique impact on marginalized and underrepresented students and families. And then about 50% being interested in the preparation of graduate students. So hopefully through the information that's shared, as well as the question and answer portion today, there'll be an opportunity for each of us to discuss and explore these topics a bit. Okay, so with that, let me go ahead and go to the next slide here in terms of, I can briefly say, my name's Shane Jimerson, and as the current editor-elect for School Psychology Review, we've been doing monthly School Psychology Review Zoom webinar sessions, and today is our special session on COVID-19 and school psychology. And so let's go ahead to the next slide, and you'll be able to meet each of the guest editors, and I'll briefly introduce myself at that time. So we'll go ahead and turn it over to Sam.
Hello, everybody. My name's Sam Song, and I'm at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I'm an associate professor in school psychology, and I've been doing work in social justice and looking at school climate and culture, restorative justice and bullying. And one of my representative publications there is just a book, the recent Roles and Functions book published by NASP, which integrates social justice throughout the book, so which is co-authored, of course. So just saying hello, and thanks for coming.
Excellent. We want to turn it over to Shizin Wang.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cixin Wang, and I'm an associate professor in school psychology at University of Maryland, College Park. And my research focuses on bullying prevention, youth mental health, school climate, as well as how schools can involve parents to help the kids. So the paper I posted there is looking at university and community partnership in promoting consultation and parent engagement. Thank you for joining our webinar.
Thank you. And how about Dorothy Espelage?
Hi, everybody. Dorothy Espelage, professor in education at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. For the last quarter century, amazing that I get to say that, I've studied bullying and school climate with a particular focus on evaluating social emotional learning programs to understand implementation science and sustainability. And I am happy to present to you a new book that I edited with Jonathan Cohen, kind of the school climate guru, if you will, which is an international perspective on school climate and feeling safe in school. We're excited to receive your manuscripts and really thinking about how we address educational opportunities in the pandemic. So nice to meet you all.
Thank you. And then Pam Finning is an additional guest editor here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Pam Fenning, and I'm a professor at Loyola University in Chicago, so happy to have you all on this call today. My research interests focus primarily on school discipline and exclusionary discipline, particularly with respect to racial disproportionality that exists within it. I'm interested in alternative to school suspension. I'm also interested in adolescent health, both behavior and social emotional health. So the book that I have provided here is a co-authored book with a colleague, Gina Coffey, and it has to do with youth sexual health, kind of with respect to adolescent health and my interest there. So thank you all so much. Excellent.
And as I mentioned, my name is Shane Jimerson. I'm a professor at the University of California here in Santa Barbara. And I've done an assortment of research and scholarship related to bullying and student engagement, and focusing on promoting the social, emotional, behavioral, and mental health development of children at schools broadly. The book that I featured here is one that I've had the good fortune of collaborating with Dorothy Espelage on. We did this a few years ago, the Handbook of Bullying in Schools, and importantly also incorporating an international perspective featuring information from colleagues throughout the world. So it's really great to be here with you today, and essentially the colleagues who have agreed to be guest editors, who have made the proposal to provide that leadership. I'm really excited about the information that they're going to be able to share today. And I want to make sure, in terms of what you're seeing, Pam, can you still see the primary PowerPoint, or did it switch?
I can still see the primary. There you go. You're on the next slide, which has to do with context, but yeah.
Okay, so it went to that. And are you just seeing one on your screen or multiple?
Looks like I'm seeing two on my screen. Mm-hmm.
All right. I think I'm gonna need to back out and come back to it real quick, just because I got myself into a pickle there. All right, sorry about that. And we'll be right back in there. Okay, so at this point, Pam, is that the right place?
Excellent. Perfect.
Okay, sorry about that. So in terms of the agenda today, we've got each of the guest editors here. They're going to share a bit of information about COVID-19 and school psychology, putting it into perspective. So they're going to provide information about the context, the importance, then also highlighting the purpose of the COVID-19 and school psychology special topic section. We'll briefly describe the types of manuscripts that are welcome and encouraged, note the due dates, and as we noted, be able to spend a little bit of time at the end to discuss questions and answers. And if you do have particular questions that come up, you're welcome to type them into the chat box, and then we'll address those as we get towards the end. Okay, so we'll go ahead and turn it over to Sam.
So all of you know that we are in the COVID-19 pandemic, and this slide just showing all the countries around the world that have been touched by this pandemic. And I believe that the yellow countries are the ones that don't have cases, but I think that may have changed by now as we're seeing more cases in developing countries.
Sorry, Sam. Sorry, I'll get you back to the right one. You keep going.
That's fine. I mean, I think this is a general slide. Many of us wouldn't disagree with what we're seeing here, but essentially that's what the slide shows. And so according to the CDC, currently the U.S. has almost 2 million cases, close to 18,000 new cases. And the deaths are 110,000, approximately 550 new deaths. And so some of the trends we're seeing, as I mentioned, there's more cases worldwide due to spread in developing countries. And in the US, there's been an increase in 20 states, and 14 of those 20 states have had the highest cases ever. And they're assuming that that's because of the opening up of the states. So again, something that we all know about, but just to set the stage. All right.
Thanks, Sam. Let's see if I can just go one forward. And I'll turn it over to Pam, I think.
Okay, good. Thank you. So while the data certainly is being compiled because we're still in the middle of a pandemic, what is really currently being documented right now is that we see serious racial disparities with respect to deaths related to COVID. So unfortunately, we're seeing about twice the rate of persons, Black individuals, who are having deaths related to COVID. And then also in the Indigenous population, while it's somewhat difficult for states in terms of the documentation of how individuals who are from Indigenous backgrounds that are categorized, we see very, very high rates of mortality in the Indigenous population, particularly in 3 states, Arizona, Mississippi, and New Mexico. So for individuals, Black individuals, the rates are twice what we would expect given their population. And for individuals in Arizona that are Indigenous, it's 5 times the rate. Mississippi and New Mexico specifically, New Mexico has 8 times the rate as white individuals. So you can search this website and see updates. This will be next updated on June 10th. And as I mentioned, this is preliminary. As we know, we're in the middle of a pandemic, but the data that exists currently is really showing high rates of racial disparity in mortality and deaths due to COVID-19. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Pam. So let me see if I can get to the next one here. Yeah. See if that'll go. No. Okay. There. Oh, it's doing the double thing again, isn't it? Okay. Be right back in there. Okay. And we'll get to the next one there. Apologies. And we'll turn over to Dorothy.
No worries. I appreciate your calmness when this is happening. So this is great. It's clear that there's been a significant educational impact around the world globally. As of June 3rd, only 6 days ago, countrywide school closures have happened in 134 countries with over 1 billion learners impacted. So this is very significant. I think what is stressful is, as many in the United States, we're seeing increases in those metrics of hospitalization and COVID cases as well as deaths. The debate of whether to open or not open, or what that will look like if we open, is very stressful, both for families, for students, as well as educators and superintendents trying to figure this out.
Absolutely. And I believe it will let me go to the next one, which is also for Dorothy. Yeah.
Yeah, so this just kind of again, this was just as of June 3rd, which could have changed. I mean, numbers are kind of very fluid and dynamic at this point. But you can see in the United States that, you know, some states are less affected than others. So whether or not there's closures in the states, and this would be the pink, depends on where you're situated. In some places they're open. Very few places are open. And then other places, they've shut down the educational system countrywide.
Wow. Good information. All right. And so she's in. She's in. You might be muted.
Sorry. So school closure not only impacts students and the school teachers and staff, it also significantly impact parents. So the recent APA stress survey found that 46% of parents in the United States report very high level of stress, 8 out of 10. So like on a scale of 10 points, then 46% report 8 or higher. And among the stressors listed on the picture, you can see 71% of parents said that managing distance learning for their children is a significant source of stress. So how can schools help parents or involve parents in this process will be really helpful for the kids.
Excellent. Thanks, Shizzy. And Sam.
So then Obviously, this raises a lot of questions and for the field, and this is really an important area regarding how this pandemic is going to affect school psychology practice. So our field, it's important because our field needs to be equipped to work effectively and ethically in the midst of this pandemic. And as we're kind of coming out of it or not, who knows, there's a new normal as people have been talking about. And that new normal is regarding schools. What that might look like, the schooling process, which has been the bread and butter of school psychology, and life in general. And so the questions it raises that are important for us is, what is the effect on the populations we serve? And what are the implications for school psychology based on that? And how do we deliver services in this new normal context effectively, ethically, and with a social justice vision of practice? Next slide.
Excellent. Thanks, Sam. So we just had to keep calm and check in for a moment. One of the things that I haven't been able to see is the chat. Sam, I don't know if there were any questions that popped up there on my computer. If I touch too many things, clearly it messes up. But is there anything in the chat that we needed to attend to, Sam?
I think something just, nope.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Okay.
didn't see anything, but just double checking, yeah.
All right. Gives everybody a chance to reflect, process if there are any questions. But as I said, feel free to add any questions into the chat, and then we'll circle back to it. All right. So let me get the next one, which I believe is she's in, but I think it might force me to get out and come back. Sorry about that. She's in. Let me just pop back in there. All right. And there we go. Okay. We'll turn it over to you, Shizin.
Sam, is that yours or is that mine? Sorry.
Oh,
I think this might be Sam's.
Oh, it might be Sam's? Okay.
Sorry
oh,
about that.
yeah. So just go in a little bit in a little bit more depth then in terms of the importance, and what's really needed is research. There's a number of issues and concerns that are lending itself more to conceptual papers, and those are still very important. However, in this outlet, we really want to focus on research, and so to be more specific then, research looking at psychological effects of the pandemic for children, families, and educators, modifications to assessment, or these assessment and intervention and other forms of service delivery. So are these, does this affect doing things either through telepsychology or whatnot? Does that affect the standardization process, which I think it does? I don't know if there's any data looking at that, and and is it still okay to do that, right? Given the fact that people are doing it already. So, and then adaptations to support training and education in school psychology. And again, this is a wide area, and especially just given the recent discussions of anti-racism and COVID, and then how that's related to COVID, and then how do training programs then address this as well? So I think those are some really interesting areas for research.
Excellent. Thank you, Sam. I think we had Dorothy on this one, yeah?
Yeah. So we're welcoming empirical work, both qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods for this call related to COVID and implications for school psychology. As Sam was talking about, there's been quite a number of adaptations, whether it's IUP, accommodations, training of school psychology, graduate students in a different format, all kinds of things. But we have to think about, are those accommodations or the IEP meetings that we would do face-to-face, now that we're moving them online, are these adaptations effective, ethical, Are we reaching all the kids and the families that we need to? And the bottom line is, are there new directions for school psychology as we move through this pandemic that will be with us for a while, it seems to be. So I think those are the types of things we want to talk about. And so we look forward again to your manuscripts.
Excellent. Thank you, Dorothy. And I think I might have got the double screen going again. Just depends on how I touch that, that's trackpad. And do the next one here, I think if it'll queue up, we've got Pam will share a little bit of information about the types of manuscripts.
Sure. So as Dorothy mentioned, a wide range of manuscripts in terms of methodology are welcome. Systematic research reviews. As Sam was also noting, really research is needed, right? This new pandemic is upon us, and we have pretty limited understanding and clearly of the impact of COVID on all the range of topics that have been mentioned thus far. So papers that are really presenting empirical evidence or provide empirical evidence, they will be making unique contributions, and they'll be given priority. And just another note, we encourage a range of manuscripts and that each submission will go through a double-blind peer review process. So that's pretty much it, a wide range of methodologies, focus on research, empirical, given priority, and then the double-blind peer review process.
Excellent. Thanks, Pam. And this next slide in terms of when the manuscripts are due. So this is our balance of trying to get content and papers that we can feature as soon as possible within school psychology review, but also recognizing that there are more papers that will be forthcoming. So the initial deadline for the receipt of submissions of papers for this special topics section is between July 1st and July 15th. So that's coming up pretty shortly. But we also want to highlight that there's going to be further opportunities for you to contribute manuscripts on this topic beyond that. And each of the guest editors are committed to continuing to review manuscripts that come in later on. We put in the July 1st through 15th date partially because in order for us to complete the review process, to make decisions, to receive revisions, to receive resubmissions, we're anticipating that those manuscripts that come in between July 1st and July 15th would be well positioned to possibly be featured within the 2020, the last issue of 2020. Now that said, if your manuscript is ready after that, or if you want to prepare a submission in November or December or even next January, we certainly encourage those submissions as well, recognizing that there'll be an opportunity to include those papers that are favorably reviewed and focused on COVID-19 and school psychology, even in subsequent issues. So I just want to make that clear because we don't want this to be perceived as the last call, so to speak, that if you don't have your paper, your manuscript, or your data together by July 15th, that you shouldn't submit it to school psych review. In fact, we do hope that you will submit your good papers, your great work to school psych review, even if it's after this, and each of the guest editors are committed to that. But we did want to identify that those papers in by July 15th do have an opportunity to go through the review process and be, if they're favorably reviewed, the possibility of being featured in the 4th issue of 2020, which for journals, that's pretty rapid turnaround timeline in terms of the potential to get this information out to colleagues and school psychologists and allied professionals. The other piece of information that's on this slide is that you submit your papers online via the Taylor and Francis portal. For those of you that have published in School Psychology Review previously, it was all through the National Association of School Psychologists, their website, but now through the partnership with Taylor and Francis, this is the appropriate place to submit papers to School Psych Review. And let me see if it'll allow me, based on this, yeah, maybe it will. Once you go to that link, it should look something like this. You should be able to see that there's a button there that you can click on to submit an article. The other point that I would make is on the left-hand side underneath the column there that says this journal, aims, and scope. There are also instructions for authors, and that can be helpful in determining what information is required, how to format it, right? Double-blind peer review, so you're going to want to make sure that author information is not included in the body of the text, and these types of basic pieces. The abstract length for school psychology review is 150 words, but in addition to that, we require an impact statement for each of the articles being submitted for review. And so in that impact statement, we want you to use plain language, simple language that can clearly communicate the content of this paper and how it makes contributions to science, to practice, and/or to policy. So as you're thinking about the preparation of your paper and submitting to School Psych Review, please do reflect on what would be important to feature in the impact statement, and also what contributions this particular paper makes to advancing science, advancing practice, and/or advancing policy relevant to school psychology. Okay, so those are the key elements as related to the submission of the manuscripts. And we're at that point. We've hopefully only taken about half of our time. We wanted to keep our time brief and make certain that we had an opportunity to engage in discussion, reflection, answer questions that our colleagues are bringing to the table here. So we can open it up. I know that we had quite a few folks on there. I suspect if I go to look at the participants list, it'll probably mess up the PowerPoint slide screen, given my experience here. So I'm hesitant to move anything. But maybe either Pam or Sam or someone who has the chat open, if you could identify if anybody had questions there, and/or you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions and engage in discussion using your audio and your video. Anything in there, Pam, in terms of chat, or not in there? Okay, so I know that Jorge, Kathleen, Tanya, there were various folks that were logged in today. Do you have other particular topics that you're thinking about, particular comments? What's most pressing for you as related to COVID-19 and school psychology?
You know, I'll speak up here. So I'm glad to hear that you'll be extending, you'll be accepting manuscripts beyond that July 15th. Well, it would be great to have it in that special issue. You know, I have both applied for rapid response funding from Spencer for monies to look at the impact on families and their homeschooling, Latino families. Yeah. And, but also doing a study with CAPS, or Counseling and Psychological Services, through a program evaluation where they had to switch to using telehealth, you know, teletherapy, with all these college students, you know, who we've learned that there were actually some benefits to that. They're less inhibited in opening up about their problems when they're not face-to-face with a therapist. But there are also some interference. So we've developed a brief survey which will inform many counseling and psychological services across the country for universities. Yeah. But as you might suspect, Shane and everybody, all this takes time way beyond the July 15th. So I applaud those who can get their manuscripts in during that time period. But mine won't be coming until after November, December, January.
Excellent. Yeah, Jorge, you bring up a lot of really great points, and I am glad that you were able to participate, and so we could make it clear that this is just the initial timeline related to getting papers in for the possible 4th issue of School Psych Review, right? But I'm glad that you were able to identify that as related to your own scholarship, because I think there's many others out there who are in this same situation. As Dorothy and Sam and Shizin and Pam and I had discussed through the process of developing this particular special topic section, as you noted, there are some special resources that are out there, some extramural funds that some colleagues have secured, and we're hoping to take advantage of those. And then also that there were some ongoing data collection projects that just happened to have data because they were already immersed in the process of looking at whatever that topic might be, whether it was distance learning, whether it was parent engagement, whether it was student engagement, whether it was telehealth, each of these diverse topics, so important. And then Jorge, I really like the other point that you're bringing up about the use of telehealth supports with various populations and the lessons learned that could well inform our work within school psychology as well. So we also take a very interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary view on this. So as various authors out there, various scholars or teams are looking and seeing this opportunity to submit their work related to COVID-19 and school psychology, we hope that they'll be taking a broad lens to this, right? And of course, as you pointed out, there's special need and emphasis that we would welcome within School Psych Review on populations of children and families who might have faced especially complex challenges within the context of distance learning and the COVID-19 context. So I really appreciate, Jorge, the points that you had made throughout there. Each of them are really so important for us, and we'd love to feature that type of scholarship within School Psych Review. Whenever you have your manuscripts prepared, as we said, whether it's later in 2020, but also there'll be some that are forthcoming in 2021. And as was pointed out in the opening remarks, we're anticipating that there's likely to be ongoing needs for this knowledge and information, and also opportunities to advance our field of school psychology through the lessons and information that we're learning. We hope that things do get much better, but it's also very possible that there will be some schools in the United States and around the world that might be returning to distance learning and remote learning this fall, or possibly even opening up within that context. So each of these are important considerations as related to the longevity of the importance of this work. So thank you very much, Jorge. Yeah,
you're welcome. And thank you for also pointing out, I especially like what you said about the transdisciplinary component, because not only are we looking at the experience from the clients, but we're also surveying the actual therapists and their experience of conducting teletherapy, you know, and their sense of efficacy, their sense of establishing a therapeutic alliance, because all these things are affected. But we're learning a lot, and I'm excited about this opportunity to be able to contribute down the road as soon as the data comes in, and we look at some of these dimensions. But I also want to point out, you know, the other positive is it's really accelerated quickly the teletherapy.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and telehealth.
Yeah.
And we're all quickly learning the pros and cons. But we may not have a choice for a long time, so we've got to look at the pros.
Yes. Yes. Well said, Jorge. Well said. Very good. Yes. And I know there's a few other folks on there. You were obviously inspired to take some time today to come and sit with us and engage in this webinar. What other things are inspiring you, or what inspired you to participate today, or questions you might have, things you might want to talk about related to COVID-19 and school psychology?
So I am, you know, for me, I feel like that this is going to be two waves. And this is what do we know to get by? You know, and so that we are doing the best practices as we know right now. And we want to get that information disseminated as quickly as possible. And then as we get more data, it's what have we learned from this crisis?
Yes.
That we can use for general use and for other things. I think it'd be really interesting at some point with the social justice issues that we're talking about. I saw a study recently on that suicide rates are going higher and higher in rural areas. And I mean, I think I just saw it on CNN or something. I'm not exactly sure, and I didn't read all about it, but this idea of using technology to get services to folks who traditionally haven't been able to get as many of these services. So this idea of taking what do we know now to get through COVID, what did we learn from COVID for other crises? And then what did we learn from COVID for other opportunities for expanding mental health services to folks who maybe have not traditionally been able to get access to them? That's the vision that I've seen for this particular issue, is that it's that first component.
Yeah, I love that, Kathleen. I love that. And I love the way you articulate the different dimensions. I agree wholeheartedly. I think in discussions with Sam and Dorothy, Shizin, and Pam, that we share that commitment as you described it in the short term, midterm, long term, what we're doing across the board. And as Jorge had mentioned as well, to help support students, to help support families, to help support teachers, to help support even the professionals, right? So those are really great comments, Kathleen, and certainly our efforts here are intended to go the distance, so to speak. These initial manuscripts will largely go towards the front end of that, as you identified, but there'll be a lot of potential lessons learned that can influence our field, our practice, and understanding of what the effects of some of those strategies are for children and families, right? Yeah. Thank you, Kathleen. Other folks that haven't had a chance to speak up that might want to share any questions, comments? If not right away, we could get, if Dorothy or Sam, she's in, or Pam have any other thoughts that they've now kind of like to share based on what some of the other comments were.
This is Dorothy. I'd like to just make sure that everybody checks out the chat and to recognize that there's NSF Rapid Grant Mechanism. You can email me and I can send you that, or you can Google it too. But thank you, Kathleen, for saying the Russell Sage Foundation. So I think you just need to be looking at, I think we're going to increasingly have kind of calls for these types of studies. And Julie indicated, which sounds great, she's beginning a study on connecting with non-English speaking families and their children and special ed during COVID, which if you talk to superintendents, are very much concerned about the fact that we may not be delivering those accommodations in the way that we should. And unfortunately, they're concerned about lawsuits down the road. We're more concerned about getting the services to the children and families, which in some ways were lacking even when we were in schools. So thank you, Julie. I look forward to seeing the results in that manuscript.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Dorothy. And I will say, having watched a few of these recordings to see how they come out, the persons watching the recordings can't actually see the chat. So anything that's in the chat, it is good to say out loud, or at least provide a sort of summary of it. You don't have to call out who said what, but thank you, Dorothy, for mentioning a couple of those resources, because it sounds like a few colleagues have already posted some resources regarding funding that might be available, forthcoming, and or on the forefront here. So yeah, if there's other things in the chat, especially given my multiple screen challenge thing that I've been experiencing, if Dorothy or Sam or Pam or Shizin see things in the chat, please do make a point of verbally sharing, because that way persons who watch the video can also have that information.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I also just want to say that we just had our Spencer proposal rejected, but they said they funded only 2% of the proposals, which means there's going to be some wonderful data coming out of that competition. That's great.
Wow.
I mean, it's not good to be rejected, but I'm looking forward to whoever responded. We live in the world of rejection, so it's fine. I'm smiling. Whatever.
We've given feedback. I know that, you know, I'm a panelist for Spencer, and not on the COVID round, but on the regular rounds.
Yeah.
I mean, I provide lots of like IES. I've been a panelist for IES too, and lots of IES like feedback for people. But I found that when I was rejected on the regular cycle, there was just virtually no feedback.
Yeah, and they said that we're not going to get any feedback on this one for the Spencer, which.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it just came today, Jorge. So.
Wow. So
yeah.
that was reviewed by the project officers only.
Highly likely, because I'm on that panel. Well, I would have been, excluded, but yeah. But at least it was a fast turnaround, and it's not like IES where we wait a year.
Yeah. It is.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Excellent. Did I also, that's great. Thank you, Dorothy and Jorge. Did I also hear, was that Sam or she's in trying to get in there just as I know it's tough when we can't social reference via Zoom, but I don't know if Sam or she's in or Pam might have.
No, I just added another. NIH has a supplemental grant. It just came out from Division 45 to look at COVID. So I just posted a link to the NIH grant related to COVID.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah, that's great. She's in. Thank you for also saying it out loud so people who watch the video can go and check that out online.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just to reiterate, I think there's more and more funding, I believe, coming out still. And, you know, in terms of small time funding, there's talks within certain school psych organizations. And I, you know, at least speaking for the ones I'm involved in particular, where you know, there might be special funding for COVID as well, but not, obviously this would not be huge money, but like some seed money or type of or junior faculty. So
any money is good, Sam. Any.
Yeah, any money is great. So
I mean, yeah, little money stipends for focus groups. So let me tell you, you know, any money.
Yeah. So, but I did want to say that, and the other thing I was thinking about is as I was listening to the discussion, and you know, is this is to start to think of you know, if you start to think of COVID as this strategy that we're examining, you know, and looking at the moderating effects and moderating variables, that's really huge, I believe. So, you know, for instance, you know, like the telehealth or the video, you know, the online Zoom stuff, you know, there's great benefits to that, but then there's always these trade-offs, right? That everyone discovered is like, oh, well, not everyone has access to these things, right? It raises different inequities. And so I think that there's a lot of things like that for almost every practice now, right? And you start to look at, because everything's so contextualized, right? Rural, and then socioeconomic status and race and GLBTQ. So I think that there's a potentially a lot of interesting things. So for example, doing a Zoom meeting, is that still, are people still able to process cognitively even what's going on in these meetings that are held online, right? What new trade-offs does it, you know, create for people, for certain populations? But also, are there certain strengths or blessings in disguise, if you will, right? So as we've all been living this COVID, there's a lot of silver linings in the cloud. What about for practice? You know, are there certain things that we're doing that might actually be beneficial? And I think that we don't really know without good mixed method research. And so plug for that, right? We really need to hear the voices of all people. And so anyways, sorry, I spoke too long.
No, I would agree. I mean, one of my classes, consultation, it got worse when I had to go online. But my advanced practicum class got better when students were doing grand rounds. They talked a lot more because they weren't next to their peers. They were more constructively critical about the cases others were presenting. And I loved it to the point that I think I'm going forever online with advanced practicum. Consultation requires a lot of face-to-face, very nuanced role plays. That was disappointing to me. That didn't work out very well. So I'm going to struggle with that if we're still doing that next spring. But that's worthy of investigating from a training perspective. Right?
It is, yeah. And then, you know, what does that have implications then for accrediting policies, right? Regarding online training and learning. And so this is like a great natural experiment to document the benefits and or obviously the harmful effects of this, and can really affect the field in the future.
So if anyone's interested in doing a national survey of school psych trainers who had to switch to online remote learning, I would be interested in being in that group because I think through help with, let's say, NASP, we might be able to access and create such a survey.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, this is, go ahead, sorry.
no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No worries. I think Patricia made a great point about the fact that we're all becoming zombies to some extent, but just building off what some others said, I think this is a great opportunity for us to also learn from one another in related disciplines. So for example, our colleagues in rural settings, they've been doing distance, teletherapy for a very long time because of that need and that access. So I'm in more of an urban area, so we've been very fortunate to have face-to-face providers, and then there's issues of equity and access. So I think the opportunity to learn really from one another in multiple contexts. So this might be a great opportunity to learn from individuals all across varied contexts. And I think the other piece too, the training perspective that was brought up is the degree to which our university policies may or may not conflict with what is happening in terms of local service providers, our advanced practicum settings. So your advanced practicum may be open and doing face-to-face or telepsychology, whereas your university may have different policies around that. So what training implications from a legal standpoint, and then as much interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary work, because perhaps others outside of school psychology and counseling psych and related field, they've been doing telehealth and teletherapy perhaps a little longer and in different ways that we can learn from others in related fields as well.
I would also add that I think, so I appreciate the conversation about training on the clinical side, but I think that there are a lot of graduate students that are a little freaked out because their dissertation was school-based, and how do you move? What's your COVID backup plan? And for many of us that do school-based work, we don't download data sets. We want to interact with the kids and teachers, and that gives us energy. And so how do we move forward when we may not have been trained to collect data online, to what are the IRB restrictions? So I also want to say that you've got, our doc students in school psych program that are, sorry about that, that are freaked out about hours. We have an equivalent group that's having to reshift their research when they're not allowed to bring subjects into university and they're not allowed to go out to the field. And I don't hear a lot of that discussion, whether it's in Division 16 or Division 17 that I'm part of. So I just also want to say that there's a voice of like, how can we regroup and think about, existing data sets such that they can get their PhD. So I don't know if other people are feeling that from their students, but that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, great points. Great points, Dorothy. Well, great points, everyone. Shizin, did you have any other thoughts you wanted to share? Any other reflections?
No.
Okay. Anybody else have any other concluding comments that they would like to share or points they'd like to make? All right, I can just share a couple of brief observations and express gratitude. For one, really thoughtful discussion there. And Dorothy, that last point you were highlighting is one that I think about a lot. Certainly students that are doctoral students who are struggling with figuring out a way forward on their dissertations. Again, many doctoral students who already proposed dissertations and now are realizing that there's no way to collect those data that they had anticipated or projected. So there is a high level of anxiety and a great level of need for us to find paths forward. I think Dorothy was mentioning in some instances it might be using archival data sets or other large data sets and applying different methodologies and analytic strategies to answer some questions that individual students had been inspired to pursue. But without children and schools open this spring and potentially many schools not being opened in the fall, that it creates a unique situation. And even if the schools are open, the complexities of the data collection, the implications for that. So I really appreciate Dorothy bringing that up. And we want to provide a space for that within our discussions, our explorations, and really trying to think about ways forward as related to the practice of school psychology, as related to the science of school psychology, and then ultimately, as Pam and others mentioned, various policies that intersect with our training, with our services, whether that has to do with telehealth, whether that has to do with who's accessing what in our university settings. So all of these are really great points that were mentioned. And again, we're anticipating that we'll get some really great submissions, some really great papers here in the next month, particularly during that July 1st through July 15th window. But we're also anticipating that we're going to see papers that will be forthcoming this fall, this winter, next spring to address these important topics. And we want to make sure that all of our colleagues know and embrace that School Psychology Review is a journal that wants to feature this good scholarship and great work to help further advance science practice as well as policy. And with all of the implications of the schools being open and the distance and remote learning during the spring, now we have this summer session, which we're not exactly sure what that's going to look like for summer schools. We're not sure what it's going to look like in the fall when students are returning. And given topics such as the summer loss that's been highly documented in the literature as related to especially subpopulations of children that don't have opportunities or as many opportunities for summer enrichment, it's going to be a situation as the schools are opening and as they are going back into session, a situation that warrants careful examination. Hopefully some districts, some colleagues out there have some data that they can compare what's happened in the past to what's going to be happening this fall, this academic year. Be great to see some longitudinal data on this. And again, those are projects that were already established maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. We encourage scholars to submit that type of longitudinal research to the journal and encourage scholars to really take a careful look at subpopulations of children and families and communities that may be especially sensitive, vulnerable, or impacted by the COVID-19 context. And as each of the participants today were highlighting, trying to identify information and knowledge that we can use to benefit children, professionals, families, communities within the school context to help promote development. So I again want to express gratitude to each of the guest editors and for all of their efforts in putting together compelling special topic section proposal. And
Shane, got a quick chat. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'll wait till you finish your sentence before I just want to get this one in.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it, Pam.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so Chunyan Yang was wondering about studies with international studies, and really there's many countries that are far ahead of us in terms of the COVID pandemic. So I think we would certainly entertain international studies, but certainly wanted to get your perspective on that as well.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And thanks for bringing that up, Pam, and Chunyan as well. And clearly, as Sam pointed out in the first slide, and Dorothy pointed out in maybe the fifth slide today, that recognizing that the COVID-19 pandemic is influencing and impacting children, families, schools, professionals throughout the world, in countries throughout the world, that these are instances where we can really benefit from the scholarship, whether or not it's precisely within the United States or whether it's done in another country, but with clear implications for children and education systems and schools throughout the world. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, Chunyan, and Pam for making certain we got it in there so that other folks who watch this video, if they hold in there for the full time, they'll also get that information about considering, again, the importance of international scholarship, helping to further advance and inform our understanding. Yeah, excellent. So again, gratitude to Sam and Shizin and Dorothy and Pam for taking on this important topic as guest editors for School Psychology Review. And we'll be in it for some time, and hopefully things will get better. There'll be appropriate situations and context for children to return to schools and families and communities to become active again. And hopefully there'll be great data to help inform us and learn from these experiences. And we'll be featuring many papers, I suspect, over the next couple years, but as soon as this fall even, for some that get in by July, that we'll be featuring papers that will help provide insights and information to continue to inform and advance the field of school psychology. So thank you, everyone. And again, we'll post this online so that people can watch the recording. And I look forward to further communications with each of